Hello, I'm Steve Nelson. In this video we're going to make a weave pattern. Now I've started out by opening CarveWright Designer version 2, and I'm going to open a new project. We'll make the board length 12 inches. We'll make the board width 12 inches and leave the default thickness at 0.75. That should give us enough room for our weave pattern on the board. Now we'll begin by creating the basic shape. We're going to select the rectangle tool, draw a rectangle in the upper left corner of the screen, and then set the size exactly using the dialog boxes here on the toolbar. Now I'm going to uncheck the aspect ratio here so I can set these two independently of each other. I'm going to set the width for 1 inch. I'm going to set the height for 0.25. Zoom in so we can see it. Now what we need to do is to create an arch across the top to make it arc. So I'm going to use the extrude tool here, and you can also select it from the tools menu. I'm going to select it here on my toolbar. And I'm going to place an arc on the screen. Select the arc tool and just draw an arc anywhere here on the bottom part of the screen is fine. We're going to essentially anchor or attach these vertices on each side to the edges of the board. So I'm going to right click on the vertex, select attach, click on the edge of the board, type a 0 and press enter. That attaches that vertex to the edge of the board. Now I'm going to do the same thing with this one over here. Right click, attach, click on the right or left edge of the board, type a 0 and press enter. Now I found that the height of the arc for our basic shape for this weave pattern, about 0.1 inches for the height of the arc works pretty good. So I'm going to attach this vertex to the top edge of the board at 0.1 inches. So I'll click on the green measurement there, type in 0.1 and press enter. I'll do the same thing over here, only this time I'll have to right click on the vertex, select attach, click on the top edge of the board, select 0.1 and press enter. Okay, we've got a symmetrical arc, but of course we need to bring the top of the arc down to the top of the board. Now we want the arc to be below the edge of the board. So I'm going to zoom in here close so you can see that I'm going to make, using the green dot in the middle of the arc, I'm going to move it up close to the top edge of the board, but I'm going to make sure that no part of the arc goes above the top of the board, or you'll have flat spots in our pattern. Okay, making sure that this says vertical. Also, I'll click on OK, and you can see that we now have an arced box. That's 1 by 0.25 inches. I'm going to select it again and make the bit optimization best. There isn't any feather on it, so we don't need to remove it, but I am going to uncheck the floor feather just as a precaution. Now I'm going to make a pattern out of this. We're going to use the patterns to actually construct the weave, so from this basic shape. So over here in the carving list, I'm going to click on rectangle, and I'm going to select group. So that groups, even if it's just a group of 1, That's how you have to make the pattern. Then I'm going to right click on the pattern name, in this case it's group, and select Make Pattern. Open my favorites folder, and inside there is a folder called Weaves, and you can see that I've done this before. We're going to call this Basic Shape, so I'll click on that and just overwrite that shape. If you're doing this for the first time, you can type in any name that you want to here. I used Basic Shape, and select Save, and I'll accept the replace. Now we don't need this shape at all anymore. We have the pattern to work with, so this basic shape that we used to create the pattern with we don't need any longer. So in the carving list over here, I'm just going to right click on the group title and select Delete, and that starts us off with a clean slate, clean board. Now I'm going to open the pattern menu, pattern list, open the favorites, go down to the Weaves and select Basic Shape. I'm going to uncheck Scale to the Board. If you double click on this to put it on the board, then it will try to scale it to the size of the board. We're not going to do that here. I'm just going to drag it over, which won't have any effect which way you have this set or not. But I always uncheck that just as a precaution. So I'm just going to click and hold the left mouse button down on it and drag it to the top left corner of the board. Now I'm going to set the bit optimization to best. I'm going to set the feather to none. I'm also going to uncheck floor feather. Now notice when we dropped that pattern onto the board that it didn't maintain the size that we originally created. And that can be a problem when we do the spacing and copying and pasting later on. So I'm going to make sure that this is the size that we want, which was 1 inch wide and 0.25 inches in height. That is critical. You need to make sure of that before we go any farther. Okay, now I'm going to cut and paste, or copy and paste, this shape back on the board 3 more times. Select Copy, and then Paste. Move the pasted copy, which was on top of our original, out of the way. Right click and select Paste again. Move it over here. Now I need 2 horizontals and 2 verticals, so I'm going to rotate this one 90 degrees so it's vertical, and I'll use the angle toolbar, or dialog box up in the toolbar, and click inside of it and type 90 and press enter. Now I'll right click and copy that and paste it back in. So now I have 2 horizontal and 2 verticals that are all exactly the same size, except they're oriented a little bit differently. Now the object here is to take the very center of this vertical one and attach it to the lower edge of the horizontal one right in the center also. Now there's various ways you can do that. You can use the attach tool, you can do it manually just by moving it over, but I find the easiest way is to use the grid and the snap to grid function. So we'll turn the grid on by selecting Layout and Snap. We'll set the grid interval to 1/8 of an inch, or 0.125. The reason we set that to the smallest increment of half of the distance of the vertical here is because that allows us to align things right dead on. We'll turn the snap objects to grid by clicking in the checkbox. We'll put a check in the checkbox of View Grid and center the grid on the board. With those options selected, we'll click on OK. and that puts the grid on the board for us. Now the next thing we need to do, I'm going to zoom in here a little bit, you'll see that this is not oriented to the corners of the grid. So if we're going to try to snap things to the grid to align them, we'll need to make this box align to the grid first. So I'm just going to move it until it snaps to the corner of the grid, and that will let us move this one. If I just grab it and drag it, left drag to the center and move it up, it'll snap right to where I want it to go. Now occasionally, especially when trying to align things, the perspective view kind of distorts things a little bit, so I'm going to turn that off by selecting View and Toggle Perspective View. Zoom back in here again. That helps us align things a little easier. Now I'm going to move this horizontal to the center part of this vertical here, so I'll click on it, click and hold and drag it over to the center and let the snap function work. Now this one goes right here, and it will snap to this edge in the center and this edge here in the center. So click and hold down the left mouse button, drag it over, let it snap into place. And it's just that easy when you have the snap to grid function turned on correctly. Now we don't need the grid anymore, so I'm going to turn it off. Selecting Layout, Snap, and uncheck the Snap Objects to Grid, and also uncheck View Grid. The rest we can leave. I don't think it's going to affect us any. We'll click on OK. Now we have our basic matrix, so to speak, that we're going to make rows, a row of 7 and a column of 7 of this shapes that are put together here. And to do that, I'm going to marquee select those 4 objects. I could also have selected them in the Carve menu over here, the carving list. And now I'm going to use Copy Offset. I have this button on my toolbar. It's Copy Offset, but you can also select it from the Tools menu. And Copy Offset is the very last one down. This brings up the Copy Offset dialog box. And we want to copy the first row horizontally. We want to copy 7, as I mentioned before, so we'll put 7 there. And we want to make that space 1.25. And what that is a combination of the widths. It's the 1-inch width of the horizontal plus the 1/4-inch width of the vertical. Combined together makes 1.25. So we'll make that 1.25, and we'll do identically the same thing in the copy vertically to get the number of rows. Select 7 for the count, the spacing at 1.25, and select OK. This should build our grid for us. Still kind of rough. We got some more work to do on it. Looks a little crude because some parts of it are at the surface of the board where they should be at depth at the bottom of the point 1 instead of the top. And we can fix that by putting a carve region in. But first of all, I want to select all of these and center them on the board. And I can do that by, since it's the only thing we have, I can do a select all from the edit menu. Or I can select them individually from the carving list. I'm going to select Layout, Align, and center the group horizontally. And do the same thing again from the Layout menu, Align, only this time center group vertically. And this puts our weave pattern right in the center of the board. Now, as I mentioned before, we want to put a carve region underneath this to make it look a little better. So I'm going to select the rectangle tool and just draw a carve region around all of our patterns. You can set the exact size here in the dialog boxes if you choose to. I'll just leave it the way that it is. I think it's fine. And I'm going to right click and center that both ways, vertically and horizontally. And then I'm going to change it into a carve region by clicking on the carve region button here on my toolbar. Now I think 0.25 is the default, and it's a little bit deep. The carve region needs to be as deep as the extrude that we made at 0.1 inches. I think that'll make it work out really well. So I'm going to set the depth of that to 0.1, press enter, and while we have it selected, let's go ahead and set the bit optimization to best, and for good measure we'll uncheck the floor feather. Now as you can see, that's pretty much made our grid pattern look really nice. Now the perspective view is on. You can see how it distorts the sides. So I'm going to toggle the perspective view to turn it back on again so we can move it around a little bit. You can see the weave pattern has turned out quite nicely. So in order to use this in a project, what we need to do is make a pattern of everything here. So what I'm going to do is select everything again by going to the edit menu, select all, and making this into a group. Now I'm going to right click on the group name, in this case it's group again, and select make pattern. Again, the dialog box is asking me where I want to save this pattern to. I'm going to open my favorites menu and go to the weaves folder that's within there, and you can see I've made this a couple of times. One time I misspelled it. This time I'm going to click on loose weave and just overwrite that one. You can call it anything you like if you're making this along with me. So I'll click on save, and then I'm going to overwrite that one that was there with the one we have here on the screen. Now we have a pattern that we can use in our projects. So let's open a project and try and use it. Now I've got a paper towel holder that I'm using, I'm currently building, and I've got the shape for it. So I'm going to open that. It's called just shape, and open it. And oh, by the way, back on this screen here, it might be a good idea at this point to save it if you want to keep it for later use in case you need to change anything or whatever. We don't really need it once you have the pattern, but just in case you might want to save it. I'm not going to. Back to our paper towel holder end. This is the basic shape here. You can see the outline, and then the outline of the vector I have in the middle for the roller. Now I don't want the weave pattern to go all the way to the outside edge. What I would like to do is make about a 1/2 inch inset in here and use that as a border. And CarveWright has the designer has a really nice tool to do that with. It's called copy offset or path offset. We'll click on path offset. Okay, you can either flip it to the outside. In this case here it's already set to go to the inside, so we don't need to do any flipping. That's this button here. We'll set the distance to 0.5 because we want a 0.5 inch border or 1/2 inch. We'll leave the fillet style to corner because we have corners there that we have to deal with. And then click on OK. And as you can see, the designer did a pretty nice job in offsetting that pattern. You cannot do that by selecting and copying and pasting and then reducing the size. All of the arcs and angles and everything get all messed up. So this is a really nice feature. Now I would like to put the weave pattern just inside this border here. So to do that, I'm going to make this a carve region by clicking on my carve region button. The default is 0.25. I think that's probably a little deep, and I know that from making this before, so I'm going to set it to 0.15, and I think that makes it look a little better. It's just a matter of preference probably. And again, I'm going to set the bit optimization to best. Make sure there is no feather on it, and remove the floor feather option. Now what we need to do is just drop our pattern right on top of it. So we'll go back down to the weaves. We use the loose weave that we made earlier. Just drag it over to the screen and drop it. Now I'm going to right click on that and select center. Both. It's a little bigger than our board, and that's okay. We can size it down, which will reduce the size of the weave also, make it a little tighter weave. So we can reduce that down to right about in there somewhere. That looks pretty good. Again, I'm going to set the bit optimization to best, remove the feather, and also remove the floor feather option. Now we have our weave pattern on top of a carve region, so we can do some magic here. If we right click on the weave pattern, we can select clip carving and inclusive, and that clips everything else out around the outside of the carve region and just leaves the pattern on the inside. Pretty clever, huh? Now, you can see that this is pretty much almost to the top of the board. So in order to give it the effect that we want, why we set the carve region depth to 0.15, we're going to merge this. We'll do a merge additive. Now I can do it here on the toolbar by selecting the pull down and select merge additive. And you can see that drops the pattern down a little ways, so it gives it a little bit of a definition there rather than being right at the top edge of the board. The next thing we need to do is to do a cutout for our outside perimeter. So I'll select it, use the cutout tool, the cut path tool. You can also select it from the tools menu and cut path. It's going to cut on the inside of the line, so we want to flip that to the outside. We want to set the minimum number of tabs. I like 5, just to be sure that it doesn't come loose and start flopping around in the machine and cause damage. And we can set the tab spacing to about 3 tabs per foot. We can set the tab height to the max. I always set the max here, especially on version 2. Sometimes it doesn't always make the tabs as big as it says it does, and in softer wood they can break and again wreak havoc inside the machine. We're going to go ahead and select a maximum pass per depth so we don't break any bits, and we'll set that to 0.25. And what that will do is go down, it'll make each pass at a quarter of an inch, so it doesn't put quite so much stress on our bits. We'll go ahead and hide the outside perimeter of the cutout and then accept. Now you can see the effect. We've got a paper towel end with a nice 1/2 inch border all the way around and a weave pattern in the center that looks very nice. Now, this is the hole that I was going to use for the dowel that goes through and holds the paper towels. And what I was going to do was turn, this is a just over an inch and a quarter. It's about an inch and 1.3. And I was going to turn an inch and a quarter dowel, and then on the insides between the ends on the inside of the dowel, on the inside of I was going to turn that down to 3/4 of an inch, so the 3/4 of an inch part just drops down inside this smaller arc here and locks the paper towels in so it can't move. In order to get the paper towels out, you would have to push up on the roll and then push the dowel out. I'm not so sure it was a great idea. It was just something I was kicking around. I'm going to cut a prototype to see if it works, and I'll let you know. I'd like to wish all of you luck in building your own weave patterns and using them in your own projects, and thank you for watching.